Everyone has to live somewhere, and everyone has to invest their money someplace. So what happens when where you live meets up with where your money is invested? Hello, real estate. Hey, welcome back to Big Money Real Estate. I'm Ilyce. Here's your daily update. My guest today has been reporting on the challenges facing home buyers here in Chicago, my hometown, even in what seems to be a very historically affordable housing market. Thomas Ricci is the assistant editor at Chicago Agent Magazine, and he's been reporting on the housing crunch for the middle class, and for millennial home buyers in Chicago. And I thought he should come on the show today to talk a little bit about those trends so that I can then compare them with him to some of the stuff that we see going on nationwide. Peter, welcome to Big Money Real Estate.
Thank you for having me.
So according to Trulia, Chicago is the second most affordable large metro area in the nation behind Atlanta, with 67% of housing stock affordable to the middle class. We just were talking in the past week with Zillow, which says, I think it was Zillow, that says that Chicago still has almost 48% of homes with mortgages underwater. So that's another sign that, especially at the lower end, affordability is pretty high here, and people are pretty much still underwater. We haven't seen the market come back enough. Tell me what you're seeing and the reporting that you've been doing.
Well, it's a very interesting situation that we find ourselves in because, like you were just mentioning, Chicago has many more housing opportunities than you typically see in other large metro areas, especially compared to, say, a San Francisco or a New York or a Los Angeles. Its median home price compared to incomes and the qualifying incomes then that come along with it are very accessible compared to those other higher priced metro areas. At the same time, though, there are many lingering effects from the downturn. You mentioned negative equity and how it remains among the highest in the nation here in Chicago in lower price points. And you also have different economic issues that we also have to confront. And that's what much of my reporting the last couple of months has dealt with. For instance, and these are more national numbers, but they very much relate to what we're seeing on the local sphere. One eye-opening stat is that 34% of Americans do not have any savings of any kind. That was a recent NeighborWorks study.
Yes, it's
and
absolutely true.
Yeah, and on top of that, 47% of American adults only have savings that can last for 3 months. Now, again, those are eye-opening stats, and it's easy to think, oh, well, that's just one study. But then you have other studies from other equally reputable sources that are very eerily similar to that. So, for instance, the Federal Reserve did a study last summer, and they found that 48% of U.S. adults could not cover a $400 emergency savings without selling or borrowing. And just the other week, Fannie Mae released its latest national housing survey, and they found that 52% of Americans have not seen their incomes improve at all in the last 12 months. So, of course, someone could be listening to these stats and thinking, how does this relate to the housing market?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if you are facing day-to-day pressures of that sort, you don't have savings, or you have just enough savings to get through either the next rental payment or the next mortgage payment, it's very unlikely that you'll have the necessary equity either to qualify for a mortgage or even make a down payment. So even when we see, for instance, Fannie Mae announcing it'll guarantee mortgages of as low as 3% with a down payment, that still represents more money than quite a few Americans can afford.
So in Chicago, what you're saying is basically, a smaller percentage of people are actually able to afford a house here in Chicago, where we haven't actually even seen the rise of home values much as we've seen them in every other part of the country, and that there's a trend towards just less affordability. I mean, if people, and I say this all the time, a really strong jobs market is the thing that equals a really strong housing market. In the Chicago area, in other Rust Belt communities, we've not seen sort of a resurgence of the job market at a price level in terms of what people are earning as to be able to afford ever increasing home values. I think, is that what you're getting at?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And looking at it from a bigger picture, this is a very interesting housing market, historically speaking, because normally when you look at past economic downturns, it's always been the housing market that has led the economy out of recession and into recovery. But as everybody knows, the housing market was at the center of this economic downturn. So the reverse is true for this recovery, where housing is now very much dependent on wider economic trends towards reaching a true recovery. And because that recovery, though, has been unequally distributed, and you have large swaths of the population, as I just cited, who have not really participated in that recovery, that makes buying a house then even more challenging. And there was an amazing statistic that came out from Realty Track last week. They compared the rate at which home prices have risen in metro areas to the rate at which wages have increased in those metro areas. And here in Chicago, prices have risen at 7 times the rate of wages. So to build on what you were just saying, this is a remarkable time to buy a house. Interest rates are still at historic lows. Home prices, especially here in Chicago, are still beneath their historic averages. And you have all the other obvious benefits that come with buying a house: a static mortgage payment with a fixed rate mortgage, equity that you can build in the house, and the, of course, the tax deductions.
Let me jump in and just say, has your reporting shown any particular neighborhoods that you think are better bets for investors?
Let's see. Well, many neighborhoods on the north side have seen substantial increases.
They have. And yes, I think they're a lot less affordable. You know, traditionally, historically in Chicago, the south and the west parts of the city have been the most affordable, but by the same token, they're the ones that have the least number of, you know, extra goodies in the neighborhood. They're the ones that typically don't appreciate as fast. But are there any pockets that you've seen that may offer a special benefit to investors?
Well, I think the next emerging area is certainly going to be the Bronzeville near South Side, because the South Loop has been exploding in value the last 5 years or so. In fact, if you look at appreciation, with the exception of near North Gold Coast and the West Loop, I think the South Loop has seen some of the most aggressive price appreciation of the recovery. So we can very much expect to see that development move south. But again, to reiterate the main point here, we're going to have to keep an eye on how these larger economic trends affect housing, and especially what happens as Gen X and baby boomer buyers start to move out of the housing market and millennials are expected to move in, because there's a whole host of economic challenges that millennials face that the previous generations did not have to grapple with.
And we'll cover those in future episodes for sure. Peter Thomas Ricci is the assistant editor of Chicago Age of Magazine. Hey, thanks, Peter, for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for watching this episode of Big Money Real Estate. Send me your affordable housing questions or comments on Twitter and Facebook, and we'll talk about them in future episodes. And be sure to share this video with all your social media. Until next time, I'm Ilyce Glink.